Welcome to The New American Dream is to Leave, the podcast where we explore the evolving concept of the American dream and what it means to pursue happiness and fulfillment beyond the borders of the United States. I'm your host, Caleb Richard Gallagher. As the author of the book, The New American Dream is to Leave, I've witnessed firsthand the growing dissatisfaction and frustration that so many Americans are feeling today. We've been sold a dream that no longer seems attainable or even desirable, a dream that prioritizes material success over personal fulfillment and authentic happiness. But what if there was another way? What if the key to living a truly meaningful and satisfying life lay beyond the borders of our homeland? In this podcast, we'll explore the stories of brave individuals who have dared to challenge the status quo and seek out a new definition of success on their own terms. My own journey began with a deep sense of disillusionment and a desperate need for something more. Little did I know that the answers I sought would be found in the most unexpected of places, and that the very concept of the American dream was about to be turned on its head. So buckle up and get ready for a wild ride as we delve into the heart of what it means to leave everything behind in pursuit of a life well lived. It's time to rewrite the script and embrace a new kind of American dream, one that knows no borders and no limits. So let's get started. Picture this, it's 2008, and I'm a bright-eyed 32-year-old working in the mortgage industry, right in the heart of the economic storm that was about to tear America apart. I had bought into the American dream, hook, line, and sinker. I thought I was helping people achieve their goals of homeownership, but little did I know, I was just a cog in a machine that was rigged from the start. As the housing market began to collapse and the true extent of the fraud and corruption within the system became clear, I found myself questioning everything I had ever believed about the American economic system. I watched in horror as banks that had knowingly peddled toxic loans received massive bailouts, while hardworking Americans lost their homes, their savings, and their dignity. One of the most egregious examples of this fraud was the prevalence of ninja loans, loans given to people with no income, no job, and no assets. These loans were handed out like candy, with no regard for the borrower's ability to repay. It was a system built on greed and deception, and I was sickened by my unwitting participation in it. As the crisis deepened and the economy continued to unravel, my anger and frustration grew. I saw firsthand the devastating impact that these fraudulent practices had on real people's lives. Families were torn apart, communities were destroyed, and the American dream itself seemed to crumble before our very eyes. I couldn't help but question the fairness and sustainability of an economic system that rewarded those who had caused the crisis while punishing those who had played by the rules. It was a system that prioritized short-term profits over long-term stability, and it was a system that I could no longer be a part of. But what could I do? I felt trapped, like so many others, in a country that seemed to have lost its way. The very foundation of the American dream, the idea that hard work and honesty could lead to success and prosperity, had been revealed as a lie. And yet, we were expected to pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and continue on as if nothing had happened. For me, the 2008 financial crisis was a turning point, a moment of reckoning that forced me to confront the ugly realities of the American economic system. It was a system that I had once believed in, but one that I now saw as fundamentally broken and corrupt. As I looked around at the wreckage of the economy and the shattered lives of so many Americans, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of betrayal and disillusionment. This wasn't the America that I had been promised, and it certainly wasn't the America that I wanted to be a part of. As the economy slowly recovered in the wake of the bailouts, I found myself trying to move on from the bitter lessons of the financial crisis. I packed up my bags and headed to Los Angeles, hoping for a fresh start in the City of Angels. I managed to land a job writing copy for a local television news station, and for a while things seemed to be looking up. I settled into a quiet life in the suburbs, finding solace in the routine of work and the simple pleasures of a stable paycheck. But even as I tried to put the past behind me, I couldn't shake the nagging sense of unfairness that had taken root during those turbulent years. Then in 2015, the rug was pulled out from under me once again. I lost my job due to budget cuts at the station, and suddenly I found myself adrift in a city that had once held so much promise. It was a harsh reminder of the precariousness of the American dream, and it left me feeling more disillusioned than ever. As if that wasn't enough, the 2016 election came along and threw the entire country into chaos. I watched in horror as the political divide in America grew wider and more vicious with each passing day. It seemed like everywhere I looked, people were at each other's throats, unable or unwilling to find common ground. The erosion of civil discourse and the growing hostility between political factions was like nothing I had ever seen before. It was as if the very fabric of our society was being torn apart, and no one seemed to know how to stop it. For me, the 2016 election was a turning point, a moment when I realized that the America I had once loved and believed in was no longer recognizable. The values of unity, respect, and compromise that had once seemed so central to our national identity had been replaced by a toxic culture of division and hatred. I found myself feeling increasingly alienated from my own country, as if I was a stranger in a land that I no longer understood. The America that I had grown up in, the America that had promised opportunity and fairness for all, seemed to have vanished before my very eyes. As I watched the political circus unfold on the nightly news, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of despair and frustration. How had we gotten to this point? How had we allowed our differences to become so insurmountable that we could no longer even speak to one another with civility and respect? It was in this moment of political and personal crisis that I began to seriously consider the possibility of leaving the United States behind. I had always dreamed of traveling the world and experiencing new cultures, but now it felt like more than just a dream. It felt like a necessity. As I struggled to make ends meet in the aftermath of the 2016 election, I found myself grappling with the harsh realities of the American economy. Despite my best efforts, I couldn't seem to get back on my feet after losing my job in Los Angeles. I scraped by on unemployment benefits for a while, but as my savings dwindled, I knew I had to make a change. In 2017, I finally caught a break when I landed a job in TV news in San Diego. But there was a catch. The salary was significantly lower than what I had been making in LA. Faced with the prospect of barely making ends meet in one of the most expensive cities in the country, I made a bold decision. I would live in Tijuana and commute to work in San Diego every day. At first, the idea seemed crazy, but the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. By taking advantage of the lower cost of living in Mexico, I could stretch my salary further and actually start to build some savings. It was my first real experience with the power of arbitrage, and it opened my eyes to a whole new world of possibilities. Living in Tijuana was a revelation. I fell in love with the warmth and generosity of the Mexican people, and I was amazed by the vibrant culture and delicious food. But as much as I enjoyed my time there, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something even better waiting for me elsewhere in Mexico. Thanks to the money I was saving on rent, I was able to take cheap domestic flights to explore other parts of the country. I found myself drawn to the beautiful beaches and laid-back lifestyle of places like Puerto Vallarta and Cabo San Lucas. As I soaked up the sun and sipped on margaritas, I couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to make one of these paradise locales my permanent home. But just as I was starting to seriously consider making the move to Mexico, a new opportunity presented itself. In the course of reporting on the challenges faced by freelance journalists, I stumbled upon an international news agency that was looking to expand its investigative journalism team. The agency was offering contracts to journalists who could work from anywhere in the world, providing in-depth coverage of global issues. As someone who had always been passionate about uncovering hidden stories and exposing injustice, I knew that this was the opportunity I had been waiting for. I poured my heart and soul into my application, highlighting my investigative skills and my desire to make a difference in the world. To my amazement and delight, I was accepted for the position. Not only would I be earning an American salary, but I would also have the freedom to live and work anywhere in the world. And as I researched potential destinations, one place kept coming up again and again: Bangkok, Thailand. With its low cost of living, vibrant culture, and strategic location in the heart of Southeast Asia, Bangkok seemed like the perfect place to launch my new career as a global investigative journalist. I could already picture myself immersed in the bustling streets and markets, uncovering stories that had never been told before. So, with a sense of excitement and trepidation, I packed my bags and boarded a plane to Bangkok in early 2020. Little did I know that the world was about to be turned upside down by a global pandemic, and that my carefully laid plans were about to be thrown into chaos. But as I would soon discover, sometimes the greatest opportunities for growth and self-discovery come when we least expect them, and when we're willing to embrace the unknown and step outside our comfort zone. As I settled into my new life in Bangkok, I couldn't help but marvel at the vibrant expat community that welcomed me with open arms. Despite the looming threat of the pandemic, I found myself surrounded by a diverse group of individuals from all walks of life, each with their own unique story and reason for calling Thailand home. In those early months of 2020, as the world began to grapple with the realities of COVID-19, I made the decision to ride out the storm in Bangkok. While my friends and family back in the States urged me to come home, I knew that I had found something special in this city, a sense of purpose and belonging that I had never experienced before. As the pandemic swept across the globe, I watched in horror as the death toll in the United States climbed to staggering heights. Meanwhile, in Thailand, the government's swift and decisive action, including nationwide lockdowns, mandatory quarantines, and strict travel restrictions, had managed to keep the virus largely at bay. Living in Bangkok during this time was a surreal experience. While the streets were quieter than usual and many businesses had closed their doors, there was still a sense of community and resilience that permeated every aspect of daily life. I found myself learning new skills and discovering hidden talents, from mastering the art of Thai cooking to learning to navigate the city's complex public transportation system. But perhaps the most striking difference between life in Bangkok and life back home was the sheer affordability of it all. For just $450 a month, I was able to rent a small but luxurious high-rise apartment that came with a staggering 30 different amenities. From the rooftop infinity pool to the state-of-the-art fitness center, I had access to a level of comfort and convenience that would have been unthinkable back in the States. As I explored this new way of life, I began to question everything I had ever believed about the American dream. Here I was living in a foreign country, earning a fraction of what I had made back home. And yet I had never felt more fulfilled or alive. I was learning to define success on my own terms, rather than chasing after the hollow promises of material wealth and status. But even as I embraced this newfound sense of freedom and purpose, I couldn't shake the feeling of disconnect and disillusionment that came with watching my home country unravel from afar. On January 6, 2021, as I watched the events of the Capitol insurrection unfold on my laptop screen, I felt a sense of shock and betrayal that I had never experienced before. How had we gotten to this point? How had the country that I had once loved and believed in become so divided, so fractured, so far removed from the ideals that had once defined it? In the days and weeks that followed, as I processed the implications of that dark moment in American history, I found solace and support in the expat community that had become my second family. We talked about our shared experiences of disillusionment and disconnection, and we leaned on each other for strength and understanding. Through those conversations, I began to realize that I was not alone in my search for a new definition of success and happiness. All around me were people who had made the brave decision to leave behind the familiar and strike out on their own in pursuit of a life that was more authentic, more meaningful, and more fulfilling. And as I looked out at the glittering skyline of Bangkok, I knew that I had found my place in the world. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of homesickness, of loneliness, of doubt. But through it all, I had discovered a sense of belonging and acceptance that I had never known before. So I leaned into that feeling, that sense of possibility and potential that had brought me to this incredible city in the first place. And I knew that no matter what the future might hold, I had found my own version of the American dream, one that knew no borders and no limitations. After 2 years of living and thriving in Bangkok, I found myself at a crossroads when I was unexpectedly laid off from my journalist job. In the past, such news would have sent me into a panic, scrambling to find a new source of income to keep myself afloat. But this time, things were different. Thanks to the low cost of living in Thailand and the financial discipline I had developed, I had managed to save a substantial amount of money, enough to give me the freedom to step back and assess my options objectively. It was during this period of introspection that I received the devastating news that one of my former colleagues from my television job in Los Angeles had passed away. The news hit me hard, and I felt a strong pull to return to the city I had once called home to pay my respects and reconnect with old friends. Fortunately, Thailand had just lifted its COVID restrictions in 2022, making international travel possible once again. So with a heavy heart and a sense of nostalgia, I boarded a plane to Los Angeles, my first visit in years. As soon as I landed, I could sense that something was different. The city that had once buzzed with energy and possibility now felt subdued and worn, as if the weight of the pandemic and the social upheaval of the past few years had taken its toll. But nothing could have prepared me for the shock I felt when I met up with a friend in downtown Los Angeles. The streets that had once been filled with life and commerce were now lined with tent cities and makeshift shelters, a stark reminder of the homelessness crisis that had gripped the city in recent years. As we walked through the streets, I couldn't help but feel a sense of despair and disgust at the inequality and suffering that surrounded us. How had the city that I had once loved so much fallen so far? How had we allowed this to happen? Attending the funeral of my colleague only added to my sense of disillusionment and grief. As I listened to the eulogies and shared memories with old friends, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had been lost, not just in Los Angeles, but in the United States as a whole. In that moment, I knew that I could never go back to the life I had once known. The American dream that I had chased for so long had become a hollow and brittle thing, a mirage that disappeared the closer I got to it. So instead of returning to Bangkok after the funeral, I made a different choice. I booked a flight to Penang, Malaysia, a place that had always intrigued me with its blend of cultures, its stunning natural beauty, and its reputation as a haven for expats and digital nomads. As soon as I arrived in Penang, I knew that I had made the right decision. The city was vibrant and welcoming, with a thriving art scene and a foodie culture that rivaled anything I had experienced in Thailand. And best of all, I was able to find a beautiful sea view apartment for just $600 a month, a fraction of what I would have paid for a similar setup in Los Angeles. In the months that followed, I threw myself into building a new life in Penang. I took on a variety of short-term gigs and freelance projects, relishing the freedom and flexibility that came with being my own boss. I found that I had more time and energy than ever before to pursue my passions and explore this incredible new corner of the world. Looking back on my decision to leave the United States behind, I feel a sense of clarity and conviction that I had never experienced before. I know now that the American dream is not a one-size-fits-all proposition, and that true happiness and fulfillment can take many different forms. As I settled into my new life in Penang and later in Siem Reap, Cambodia, and various cities of Vietnam, I found myself reflecting more and more on the journey that had brought me here. I thought about the struggles and the triumphs, the moments of doubt and the moments of pure, unadulterated joy. And I realized that my story was not unique, that there were countless other Americans out there who had embarked on similar journeys, each one in search of their own version of happiness and fulfillment. It was this realization that inspired me to write The New American Dream is to Leave, a book that would capture not only my own experiences, but also the stories of other Americans who had found purpose and meaning beyond the borders of their homeland. As I began to gather these stories, I was struck by the common threads that ran through them. Like me, many of these individuals had grown disillusioned with the traditional American dream, with the idea that success and happiness could be measured in dollars and cents, in square footage and job titles. They had felt trapped by the expectations and the limitations of their own culture, and had yearned for something more, something deeper, something more authentic. As I wrote, I found myself pouring my heart and soul into the pages, driven by a passionate desire to share this message with as many people as possible. I wanted to inspire others to take control of their own happiness, to explore alternative paths, and to embrace the transformative power of stepping outside their comfort zone. I thought about my own journey and how each new destination had brought with it new challenges, new opportunities, and new perspectives. From the vibrant street art of Penang to the ancient temples of Siem Reap to the bustling markets of Ho Chi Minh City, every place that I had called home had left an indelible mark on my soul and had helped to shape me into the person I am today. As I put the finishing touches on the book, I felt a sense of excitement and anticipation for what the future might hold. I knew that my message would resonate with people from all walks of life, with anyone who had ever felt trapped or unfulfilled, anyone who had ever yearned for something more. And I knew that, through my words and my story, I had the power to inspire others to take that first step, to leave behind the familiar and the comfortable, and to set out on their own journey of self-discovery and transformation. So to anyone out there who is listening, anyone who has ever felt the pull of the unknown, I say this: embrace it. Embrace the fear, the uncertainty, the exhilaration of stepping outside your comfort zone. Embrace the opportunity to see the world through new eyes, to learn and grow in ways you never thought possible. Because at the end of the day, the new American dream is not about reaching some distant, shimmering horizon. It's about having the courage to chase your own unique vision of happiness and fulfillment, wherever in the world it may lead you. And it's about having the wisdom to know that no matter where you end up, you'll always be exactly where you're meant to be. Before we wrap up, I want to take a moment to remind you that if you're looking for more inspiration and practical advice on how to pursue your own version of the new American dream, be sure to check out my book, The New American Dream is to Leave. It's available exclusively on Amazon, and it's packed with real-life stories, insights, and strategies for making your dream of a life abroad a reality. In the book, you'll find in-depth profiles of Americans who have successfully built new lives in countries around the world, as well as practical tips on everything from navigating visas and finances to finding housing and building a social network in a new place. Whether you're a digital nomad looking to work remotely while traveling the world, or a retiree seeking a more affordable and fulfilling lifestyle abroad, this book has something for everyone. So if you're ready to take the next step in your own journey towards a life abroad, I highly encourage you to head over to Amazon and grab a copy of The New American Dream is to Leave today. And while you're at it, be sure to subscribe to this podcast and leave a review to let us know what you think. Your feedback and support mean the world to us, and they help us to continue creating content that inspires and empowers people like you to chase your dreams and create a life that you love. Speaking of empowerment, I'm really excited about our next episode, which features a very special guest. We'll be talking to James and Sarah, a digital nomad couple who have been working remotely while traveling the world for the past 3 years. They'll be sharing their experiences of living and working in places like Bali, Portugal, and Mexico, and offering some valuable insights and advice for anyone who might be considering a similar lifestyle. From the challenges of finding reliable Wi-Fi and navigating time zones, to the joys of immersing themselves in new cultures and building a global network of friends and collaborators, James and Sarah have a wealth of knowledge and experience to share. So be sure to tune in next time for what promises to be a fascinating and inspiring conversation. And in the meantime, remember, the new American dream is yours for the taking. It's waiting for you out there in the wide, wide world beyond our borders. All you have to do is take that first step. So here's to your journey and to the incredible adventures that await you. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time on The New American Dream is to Leave.
Jungle.